Today we're going to be running through the new 2019.3.1 patch that we had come out a little while ago, kind of looking at some of the new features that are involved with it, but also kind of talking about the download and the installation kind of prep stages that need to be done in order to get to that new version. Some of you may be familiar with how to kind of run through this, and some of you may not. So we want to kind of go through the various steps of where to go to get the download, how to do the installation itself, and what all needs to be prepped and ready to go before you begin that installation process. So we're going to kind of look at what goes into that, how to upgrade to the new version, how to get ready for that upgrade, and then a quick glance at a couple of those new features that are involved in it. So first, the first question is going to be, where do I find this new patch? Every time we put out a new release, we usually try to send out an email along with it, letting you guys know that the new version or new patch is available. There should be a link in there on how to find the download. Otherwise, it's going to be at the gverse.com/downloads website. It'll prompt you for some login information, so make sure you have that on hand and that you're registered for the portal. Then log in and choose the file that you want to download. You should see a little window at the top, kind of what you see on the right-hand side of the screen here, prompting you, what are you looking for, what type of download are you looking for, and what version of the software is it for. So in this case, it's going to be, this is for GeoGraphix, it is a patch installation, and it is for version 2019.3. And that'll filter out all the other downloads we have on the website to only look for patches that are available for 2019.3, making it a lot easier to find the files that you need. Once you find those files, you'll just add them to your bucket and then download them. If you notice that your download isn't beginning or it hasn't prompted you on where you want to save the file, either try other browsers. We notice from time to time there might be some issues with Chrome. So either try other browsers, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, some of those other browsers should work fine, or check to make sure that your pop-up blocker is disabled either temporarily or for the website so that the download can start. Once the file is downloaded, how do you actually begin the installation? So you want to make sure that all GeoGraphix applications are closed and that services are no longer running for GeoGraphix. Once that's done, then you'll go and find wherever you downloaded the file to, find the executable file, and run that as administrator. You'll see the menu prompt appear here. The next step here is saying to update. You'll just click through the options until you get the actual download to start. And once the installation is finished, you should be able to open up GeoGraphix and begin updating your projects. So if I'm going to be updating my projects, what needs to be prepped ahead of time? Because this is a patch installation, 2019.3 must be installed ahead of time. This is not a full release in and of itself. It is meant to be installed on top of 2019.3. So if you do not have 2019.3, you'll need to get that version first. There's no new license file needed for the patch. Your 2019.3 license file still will work. If you're coming from another release prior to 2019.3, then you'll need to get a new license file for at least version 2019.3 prior to installing that in order to make sure you can actually open it and run it. And then once you install 2019.3, the patch can be installed on top of that. You want to make sure that you have your projects backed up in case anything goes, you have any issues, you need to roll back, or you notice a project's not updating properly. Once a project is updated to the new version, it cannot be rolled back to a new version. So if you install 2019.3.1, update your project and start working, and then realize you want to go back to a previous version, you cannot do that. So you want to make sure you have a backup available of the project in its 2019.3 version prior to doing so. You can either back up projects one at a time to the archive option in Project Explorer, or you can simply make a copy of your project folder or zip your project folder and have that stored someplace safe as well. as opposed to doing one project at a time for the archive option. Make sure the services are stopped and GeoGraphix is closed. And if you're going to be doing this on a network environment, then all machines need to be updated simultaneously, as well as on the server. If any machine's not on the same version, then they will not be able to see the server-based projects or be able to activate the server-based projects. So I'll make sure that if you're updating one user, all users in the same environment are all updated, as well as the server machine itself. So let's take a look at some of the new features that are coming along with 2019.3.1. Once we get through this, we'll go through the steps of downloading, backing up projects, and installing the software. Some of the new features involved, Project Explorer. First thing we've added is in the data import history, which is a new feature we've introduced a while back. You can now track DIT meter data being imported, kind of who started that import, when it was started, and where the source file came from. So that gets tracked along with the well and LAS imports into the project. For GeoAtlas, we're supporting Esri version 10.8 and 10.8.1. So there will be a new runtime engine download available on the website. With the conditional pies, you can use to highlight data within GeoAtlas. Whenever you're filtering out specific information tops, you can now also further filter that down on a specific source for that data. We've implemented some new connections with interval data that you pick within X section, within petrophysics, or within geomodeling. That information then gets saved out to Zone Manager. We can now track that in various modules a little bit easier now. Within GeoAtlas, the ability to color code wellbores based on some of that interval data has been implemented. For depth registration, we can now export raster logs in the MJ Systems REG format, in addition to the format that we had in there beforehand, the DRA format. So we have two export formats now, REG and DRA. In Wellbase, when importing data via spreadsheet, we've included a new checkbox in there, especially when importing header data, where you have the option of adding new wells with the import or not. So if you have a spreadsheet full of a bunch of data, excuse me, spreadsheet full of new data that you want to update in an existing database, as well as brand new wells, you can choose whether those brand new wells get imported, or if you're only going to update existing wells. That way you don't have to clean up spreadsheets ahead of time. That's primarily for the header table for importing information. DIT meter and interval data are now importable via spreadsheet. DIT meter previously was only importable via petrophysics or Prism, and interval data was picked through cross-section or in petrophysics. The renamed field captions, when you rename various tables and fields inside of Wellbase, those names will carry over to the spreadsheet importer. So if you rename, for instance, user 1 within the header table, whenever you go over to your spreadsheet import in the drop-down menu, it should now give the renamed field of user 1 as opposed to it being the default user 1 from there. So those renames will carry over from each one. And the zone and attribute tab has a new look as well. The old look is still there, still available, but it also has a kind of a new look to it as well. We can kind of more further identify which attributes are available for a particular well. In Query Builder, you can now filter wells based on interval data. So again, just more integration with that the interval information you have, so you can filter out which wells you've picked interval data for. And lastly, in petrophysics, the option for a multi-well CSV export. Previously, you would just have the single well CSV export or multi-well LAS export. Now we have a multi-well CSV export, so you can get them in an ASCII format. The core curve name renames are synced to the core table renames in Wellbase. So any kind of changes you make to those names for the user fields or else anything else, that name is also resynced back into the core tab. You can post treatment data type along the template for downhole data. So previously you could put like DST, IP, perforations, completion data. Now we have some for treatment data. You can put along the downhole information. Curve data can now be imported into composite curve sets. Previously it was just calculated or computed curve sets and the import curve sets. Now you can import those directly into composite curve sets that users create, as well as deleting out multiple curves at once using the delete curves option. You can do that based on curve set as well. And we've also added additional updates to the Petrel plugin, where we can work with Petrel version 2019.x and 2020.x. So any one of those versions of 2019 and 2020 Petrel now work with GeoGraphix 2019.3.1, and there is a new download for that as well if you need a Petrel connector, a new installation file for that, in addition to the 19.3.1 patch. And then various bug fixes that come along with this as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the processes that will be involved with getting everything set up, and then the installation process itself. So I'm going to start first here in Product Explorer. So within Product Explorer, I'm in the 2019.3 version right now. So again, some of the first things you want to do is make sure that your projects are backed up. So first way you can do that is through archiving. So I can take my Stratton project here, right click on that and archive. That will create a backup of this project. You'll see the file name here. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to Stratton underscore 19.3, indicating this is a 19.3 version of the archive. Essentially, the archive will take whatever version that project was last updated to. So I was using this project in 2019.3, so when I make the archive, it keeps the archive in that same version. When I update to the new release and I update the project, this archive will keep it in the previous version. So I put the 19.3 to indicate that that's the version that it's taken. I can also put today's date to indicate when that backup was made, if you want to do it that way. When the archive is created, it keeps it within the project folder where that project resides. So I can click on my projects folder over here on the left-hand side, and I can see all the various archives that I've made of all the projects that I have in this folder. And there's my Stratton underscore 193.zip. And then from here, I can restore that project if I need to restore the archive at any time. So all those backups get placed into the same folder that is housing that project. If it's on the server, it'll get stored on the server location. Users can make the archive from their own machines and it will still get saved out to the server. Like I said, you can also back up the entire project folder. So if I go and look for that, here's my projects folder. I can either copy it, paste it somewhere else for safekeeping, or send it to a compressed zipped folder and have that zip folder somewhere for safekeeping. That'll have all of my projects inside of it and just have that whole project folder available. Then if you need to restore that backup, you just take that project folder and paste it over the one you had previously. Okay, so that's how you'll make your backups. So you want to make sure you have backups in case you need to roll back your version for whatever reason. And also just a good idea to keep backups of your projects on hand for any other number of other reasons. So that's where you make those backups. Once the backup has been made, I want to make sure that I have GeoGraphix closed and all the services stopped. So you can either just close GeoGraphix up here at the top, or I can go down to my icon tray down here at the bottom, right-click on my GeoGraphix icon, and shut down Discovery. And that'll go through the process of stopping the services at the same time as closing everything out. Just want to make sure that maps are saved, cross-sections are saved, interpretations are saved, everything's saved, and then we'll go through the process of closing those and then stopping the GeoGraphix services. The two things you want to do there. If you're doing this in a network environment, make sure that users are aware that you're doing that ahead of time, as it will kick everybody out of the server project once that happens. So make sure everybody has their work saved and they're all out of it before you do that on the server. Okay, so we got the services stopped and GeoGraphix closed, so I should be ready to run the installation. So first let's look at where we get that installation file. So I'm here on the gverse.com/downloads page. Again, make sure you're logged in here so you can get access to this. As long as you're up on M&S and you have an active login, anybody can come in here and get to the downloads as needed. So it says it's going to prompt you for what type of files are you looking for. You'll see there's a number of different options here for the various applications or the whole GeoGraphix suite itself. So there's GeoGraphix, attributes, the connect tool, geomodeling installation for some of the older versions, inversion, well planner, predict 3D, web steering, ExpoSim, PetroHive, and the utilities files for each release. So you just choose the one that you're looking for. This is for the full GeoGraphix suite. This is a patch. So you see your patch files are going to be found here. You can also filter out based on a major release. This is going to be like your 2019.3, your 2019.2, 2019.1, and so on. And then hotfix files, as we release those, will be in their own category. So you have hotfixes, patches, and major releases. This is a patch. And then what version is this patch for? This is going to be for 2019.3. You can see all the various major releases that we have here, going all the way back to version 5000. When you scroll down, you should see the various files that have been filtered out here. So I see GeoGraphix 2019.3.1 setup. There's an executable and an MSP file, depending on how you need that particular file. If you're just doing kind of a standalone, your own installation, either file should work. In some cases, the MSP file will be needed for batch installations or scheduling installations. So either one should suffice. Simply check the box next to the file that you want, add it to the bucket, and then download now to initiate that download. Go through the disclaimers, and then download bucket to kick off the installation. It should show you all the files you have selected, how big the files are, and then you download the bucket, and it'll run everything there that you have selected. I've already got the file downloaded, so once you've kicked that off, and it prompts you on where you want to save the file, and you'll go through it'll download it, and then save it out to that folder. I'll go out to the folder that I saved it in. I should see now a GeoGraphix 2019.3.1 setup.exe file that I've downloaded here. And so I'm going to right click on that and run that as administrator. So it should kick off the installation file. We'll see a couple of windows pop up here. It'll compute your space requirements, make sure you have enough space on the machine to run the installation, and then we're going to go through update, and then the status bar will go through and validate and install the needed files. And then once that progress bar is finished, I'll simply click on finish, and then you can launch GeoGraphix again once that is completed. Usually at this stage, if you have GeoGraphix still open and services haven't been stopped, during this installation process, you'll get some windows popping up saying that we could not get access to a particular file because it's still in use, or anything to that effect. So it'll prompt you to close at this point then. So usually it's a good idea to have that done ahead of time. Depending on the version that you're on, this is primarily for full releases and not patches, but depending on the version that you're on and how many versions back you are, installation could take a little bit longer in some cases. It also just depends on the machine itself. Since this is just a patch on top of a full release, it shouldn't take too long to do. Should be towards the end here. So it'll restart the services once it completes the installation here. That should be the last progress bar that we see. Once that finishes, we can click Finish. And we can open up GeoGraphix. So installation has finished successfully. I'll go ahead and launch GeoGraphix again. Now I'll see the release is 2019.3.1. It's my new version. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose a project from the list that I want to activate. Now, the project hasn't been previously updated to a new release, and this is one of my projects that I've been working on with 2019.3.1 already, so it technically is already updated. But if you're going to be updating a project that you hadn't updated to a new release, let me see if I have one of these that I haven't updated yet. Yeah, so usually you'll see a window like this pop up saying that we need to update this project to a new version, and this will be where you get the option to archive. So again, you can archive at the same time you do the update and after the installation. I don't need to have an archive. I've already got it back up somewhere else. And then that'll go through the process of then updating that that database to the new version. And again, depending on how many versions back you are, that update may take a little bit longer in some cases. But again, as a patch update on top of a full release, it usually doesn't take very long. So the process didn't take very long, and now I'm in that that particular project that's active. The larger the project is, the longer it may take as well. So do be aware of that. So that's kind of one project at a time. Whenever you activate a project, it'll prompt you for the update. You can also run the Project Database Rebuilder tool, where you can update multiple projects all at once. And if this is in a network environment, you want to do this on the server. You can't do this from a user machine, as they won't have access to do those updates. You have to run this from the server itself. So I go into the project tree, and I'll check the box next to all the projects that I want to update, and then I can start that process, and it'll go through project by project, and it'll prompt you at each stage if you need to make a backup or an archive while you do that update. And then it should go through each project and update them all at once, as opposed to having to right-click and activate each one individually. Okay. So that's my installation's done. My project is now updated. Let's go ahead and just take a look at some of those new features. I'm just going to show a couple of them here. I'm going to start here in well-based, and we're going to look at the new zone tab first. That's kind of be one of the first things you'll notice kind of right away. I'm going to go to the zone tab here and find a well that's got some data. So zone tab looks a bit different. Previously, you see kind of down here at the bottom of that little pane, there's tab view and there's grid view. So the tab view is the new view that we've included in here. As I said, it kind of just shows you the attributes that you have available. So this well has a porosity, a phi-AAV, and an SWAAV. It gives you their values and some other information, whether it's a text attribute, a data attribute, there'll be data in there. Its units, number of decimals, and the change date. So you can see when that attribute was either created or last updated. Then if I look in the left-hand side, kind of underneath the list of wells here, there's something called the hot list. This is where I can kind of filter out specific zones. So if there's multiple zones that are available on that particular well, and there's multiple data types, I think most of these are just going to have the single one. Yeah, single one. You can kind of choose which zone you want to look at, and it'll show you what data is available in that well in that particular zone. So it just gives it it's a bit more readable whenever you're looking in what type of data is available, whereas previously the zone tab, when you look at it, it'll give you a grid view like this where it shows you every single attribute that is in the project and whether that attribute is kind of something that you're looking for. It would get kind of cluttered from time to time because it would just list every single attribute that you had. And it even had its limits. It could only show up to 255 columns in there, so if you had more than 255 attributes, you would get a little message prompt saying, we can only show 255 attributes, so we're just going to stop showing from here. After that, though, you could filter out specific zones and specific attributes if you didn't want to see everything. And that would be user-specific, so each user can kind of have their own view of that. by default, it's set up to show every single zone and every single attribute. You can also filter from the tab view, the new view in here, or you can right-click in here, filter zones and attributes, do the same kind of filtering. So the options available in either view just kind of depends on how you want to view that data. So kind of a new look to that particular tab. So again, one of the things you'll notice right away when you go to there, because the default view is now set to tab view, but you can change back to grid view very easily there. Okay. And just real quickly, I'm also going to show the export here for the curve data. So up at the top, there's this option for export curves. So you'll see the various export options. So there's your multi-well LAS export, but you can also do export curves here. And you can choose whether to do all wells, a filtered well list, your current well, what curves to include, and then if that's going to be an LAS file or an LBS file or a text file, whether that text file is CSV, space delimited, or tab delimited.txt files. So a bit more control on kind of how you're exporting those files and a bit more options included in there as opposed to just a singular LAS file of everything that's in there or based on a particular template. Now you can kind of pick and choose which curves are going to be exported out. Okay. And so there's a lot of other new features in there as well, but those are some of the ones I kind of wanted to focus on and highlight there. So yeah, that's kind of it for that update, kind of how to go through that process and everything else. Again, as a patch update on top of a full release, not much else is really necessary. Usually whenever you do full releases, you'll usually have to, at least in network environments, reconfigure server and decom settings, but for patch installations, you shouldn't have to worry about that. And as we come up to the next full release, we'll put on another webinar kind of similar to this one and walk through some of those processes as well and kind of revisit some of these things.